All right, so if you get signed in here, guys, you will find in there that I've posted this new assignment, latent heat of water activity. Okay, and then you'll find in there the lab sheet, the instruction sheet, as well as the lab report sheet here. Now, again, this isn't coming in for marks, okay? We're gonna do all of this thing in class today, okay? All of the analysis together, all of that kind of stuff. So you have it for both your unit and final exams because there'll be some questions about it on both of them, okay? So it's not coming in for marks. We're just gonna do it together as an activity, okay? But that doesn't mean that you need to, it means that you need to pay close attention, okay, as we do it, because obviously there'll be some assessment on it here this week and later. All right, so the purpose of this lab, what we're trying to do with this lab is we're trying to determine experimentally the latent heat of fusion for water. Right now, we already know that that number is supposed to be 333 joules per gram, okay? Because we've used that in our heating curve of water problem solving questions. Right? So we are just trying to experimentally determine whether that number is accurate, okay, and see if we can get something near that number. In order to do that, we're going to do a quick experiment that's very simple. We're just going to put ice in water, okay, and we're going to measure its temperature change. That is the temperature change of the water, not the temperature change of the ice. Okay, why are we not going to be measuring the temperature change of the ice? What's the ice doing? Melting. Does its temperature change while it's doing that? It does? Okay, let's review. Okay, so let's quickly review here. Here's the heating curve of water. You know, that thing we worked on for 2 days last week. Okay, when we get ice to 0 degrees Celsius and it melts, it goes to here. Does its temperature change? No, that's why we're not measuring the temperature change of the ice in so much as this temperature doesn't change. Okay, what will change is the temperature of the water we put it in, because we're just going to take water out of the tap. That's not going to be 0 degrees Celsius. It's going to be like 15 or 20. Okay, so it's going to come out of the tap and it's going to be starting right there. Okay, so the water is going to start right about here, okay, and its temperature is going to go down because we put ice in it. Okay, the energy from the water is going to be used to melt the ice. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate how much energy the water loses. That'll be the amount of energy the ice gains. All right. So essentially what we're going to be doing is setting up a mathematical equation that says this. Okay, the E lost by the water is going to equal the E gained by the ice. All right, and that's going to mean, okay, that we're going to take MC delta T for the water, and it's going to equal M times LF for the ice. Everybody all right with that? Okay. So getting the mass of the water is pretty straightforward. 1 milliliter of water has a mass of 1 gram. Pretty convenient. The whole metric system is based on that fact, actually. Okay. So we'll have however many milliliters of water, that will be our mass. Okay, if it's whatever the experiment tells us to use. And then we'll have C will be 4.2 joules per gram degrees Celsius because we're dealing with water, and the temperature change is something that we'll measure with the thermometer as the experiment goes on. The mass of the ice, that's going to be a little harder to determine. Not like you can just put ice on a scale. It slides off, slippery. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to record the initial volume of water and the final volume of water. Why are they going to be different? Right, because the ice is going to melt. So however many milliliters more water we have at the end is how many milliliters of ice melted. And that'll be the mass of the ice that melted. Okay, so that's why we have to record the volume of water. Right, so that's where we'll get the two masses from. So this will be the mass of the ice, and this will be the mass of the water. Okay, they'll be different, obviously. And then we'll just bring the mass of the ice over here, and we'll be solving for LF. Right, so the experiment itself is pretty straightforward. Record your volume of water. Okay, record its initial temperature. Put the ice in. Stir the ice around until the temperature of the water stops changing. Okay, because it's going to start to drop right away. Okay, it'll drop, it'll go down, and then it'll stop. Okay, now ideally it should go down to what temperature before it stops? 0. It's not going to, okay? It's going to get to about 4 or 3, okay? Somewhere in there. But as soon as you see that temperature stop changing for like a minute, okay, if it hasn't changed in a minute, then you're going to take the thermometer out and you're going to reach in and scoop out the remaining ice and put it in the sink. Okay, so you're going to scoop out that ice, kind of shake it off, get all the water that's on it and on your fingers back into the beaker. Okay, put the ice in the sink, and now you have your volume of water that contains both the melted ice and the initial volume. Okay, we're going to do that a couple of times so we can average the numbers. Okay, pretty straightforward. Okay, so recording initial temperature and final temperature of the water. Okay, so the things we need to record are, okay, mass of the water, okay, and that'll be essentially our initial volume. And we'll be told what that number is. We'll go over that in a minute. Okay, mass of the ice, okay, that'll be the change in volume. Okay, and then initial temperature and final temperature. Right? Those are the things we need to record in order to do the math and figure out what the latent heat of fusion for water is. All right, so back to this here. Okay, we're not going to bother, making a hypothesis here. Okay, we're going to skip that part for now. For today, we're just going to do the experiment and the calculations. Okay, so carefully measure 200 milliliters of water with a graduated cylinder. Okay, you are going to get a 600 milliliter beaker. It's big. Okay, there are markings on the side. They are horrible. Okay, they can be off by as much as 25 or 30 mils. Okay, so we don't use them. They're just there as a guideline, not as a measuring tool. The graduated cylinders are more accurate. Okay, so I will bring in some graduated cylinders to the lab. Okay, and you're going to we'll bring in the 100 mil ones, fill them twice, pour them in there. Okay, so what's our initial mass of water? 200 grams. Okay, so our mass of water is 200 grams. We can record that right now. Okay. Record the exact volume, pour the water in the beaker, stir the water, and then measure and record the initial temperature. Okay, so we haven't put the ice in yet. This is just the water. Okay, we've stirred it, we've measured the initial temperature of the water. Okay, then add approximately 100 grams of ice. That's a handful. Okay, I have a bag of ice at the front. Okay, just take a handful of it, put it in. Okay. Then you're going to stir, and you're going to continue stirring and observing the temperature. Important note here. There are two things that you will have in the beaker at this time: a stirring rod and a thermometer. Which one do you stir with? The stirring rod. If you stir with the thermometer, they have a tendency to break off, okay? Because they get etched as they rub against the glass and stuff. They're not designed for that. They're designed to sit in there, okay? The glass stirring rods are expendable, okay? If they break, so be it. That's what they're designed for. The thermometers are far more expensive to replace, okay? So we want to avoid breaking thermometers. Okay? So hold the thermometer in there, stir the mixture. It'll sound like, wind chimes. It'll be very zen in there because we'll hear the cubes moving around and the clinking of the glass against the glass. Yeah. Okay. So we do that again until the temperature has stopped changing. It says 0 here, but we know it's not going to get there. Okay. It's just going to get down to a place where it stops. Okay. At that point, okay, take the thermometer out, scoop out the rest of the ice, put it in the sink. Might be able to reuse it on your second trial. Okay. And then do your measurements. Okay, so that would be, and we need to measure the final volume of water. So you're going to have to pour all that water where? Back into the graduated cylinder. So measure 100 mils, pour that out. Measure 100 mils, pour it out. Whatever's left is how much ice melted. So you'll pour that into the graduated cylinder and record that number. That'll be your volume of ice that melted. Okay. And obviously you'll also have the final temperature, okay, recorded before you throw out the ice and water. Okay. Okay, questions on that? Everybody's good? Okay, then we'll come back and we'll work on the analysis together. The final volume will tell us the amount of ice that melted because it won't be 200, right? It'll be more than 200. Whatever the difference is, that's the volume, that's the mass of ice. Okay, any other questions? All right, so we're going to the biology lab. Okay, so we're going to walk down the hall. The door should be unlocked because I unlocked it this morning. Just walk quietly to the biology lab. Okay, take some paper with you to record the numbers we said to record. Okay, if you didn't write those down, okay, make sure you have them there. and we'll head over. Okay, so I need you guys to follow along here and do some typing in of the data here, okay, as well as the calculations so that we all have the same thing. So the first question asks us to calculate the amount of heat that was removed from the water to convert the ice into its liquid form using E equals mc delta T. This is the amount of heat that was required to melt the ice. Okay, so we're going to go back to here to our data. Okay, and we're going to do that calculation for trial 1 and for trial 2. Okay, so we're going to go E equals mc delta T. Now we know that the mass of water was 200 grams. Okay, and we know that the specific heat capacity of water is 4.2 joules per gram degree Celsius. And we know that the temperature change for trial 1 was 20 degrees Celsius. All right, so we're going to have our 200 times 4.2 times 20 degrees. All right, so we're looking at 16,800 joules worth of energy. Okay, everybody all right with that? Yes? Okay, so that's the amount of energy that was used to melt the ice in trial 1. That is also then going to be equal to this. E equals MLF, because as we said, it's the energy that was used to melt the ice, right? We know that the mass of the ice in trial 1 is 62 grams, okay? So if we manipulate here to get our latent heat of fusion, we're just going to be dividing both sides by M, which will mean we'll take our 16,800 joules and we'll divide by 62 grams. Okay, now I know that seems kind of a ways off from 333, but it's actually not too bad, right? The reason being is this. There's a lot of other factors, okay? There's a lot of other places where the energy comes from. Where else could the energy come from? Yeah, the surroundings, okay? The surroundings are also 20 degrees Celsius. They're going to be putting in some air, okay? You reach your hand in to pull out all that ice, okay? Did you get it all? Were there tiny little pieces maybe that stayed behind? Okay, did you remove some of the water when you did that? Didn't get it all back in there? There's all kinds of places where our data can kind of go wrong. You know, if we'd have had like a strainer or something like that, maybe we'd have done a better job. Except that in using a strainer, we'd have been holding the ice over the water for longer, and probably more of it would have melted, which would have also skewed our results a little bit more. Okay, and we waited for at least a minute after the temperature stopped changing, which means more ice melted during that time than we really needed to have melt. Okay, does everyone kind of follow me there? So what usually throws us off is that in this experiment, this number is usually too big. Okay, and there's just no way around that in terms of experimental error. Okay, if we use our data for trial number 2, okay, we'll just do that data again here. So we'll go E equals mc delta T. Okay, we've got, again, 200 grams of water times 4.2 times a temperature change of 18 degrees this time. So 200 times 4.2 times 18. So there's our energy, and we're going to divide that by 66 grams this time. So we're going to get an even smaller number. We're going to be a little bit further off this time. Okay, we're going to be 200, almost 100 off this time. Okay, and that happens a bit in this lab. Okay, you can see what your data says, but you're going to be doing the exact same calculations that I just did. Okay, this came out to 15,210. Okay, joules, and then I set that equal to E equals MLF, just like I did over here. Okay, I divided both sides by M to get LF. That was 15,210. Okay, divided by 66 grams. Okay. Right, you can see how your data came out here, right? But obviously there's a fair amount of experimental error in this lab, okay? And so if we were actually doing a lab report, there'd be quite a bit to write in the evaluation part of the lab, okay? All right, is it possible for you to see something like this on a unit exam? Okay? It's possible because it's a heating curve of water thing, okay, but it's also a specific heat capacity problem. So it's kind of both. Just be aware of that when you're studying. You'll probably want to have a look at what we just did here, okay, in terms of the analysis. Okay, I'll give you guys a minute or two to finish up your calculations here, then we'll talk about the other analysis questions. Okay, so just looking at the other analysis questions, we've kind of talked about these already. So we did number 2 already, okay? Was the ice changing in temperature? We answered that. We said, no, the ice isn't changing in temperature, okay? Now, on the heating curve of water, it always says you have to heat the ice to melting and then it melts, except that ice had been sitting out in the sink already. Was it already at 0? It was, okay, because it was already melting in the bag. Okay, it was melting in the bag, so it was already at 0 degrees Celsius. There wasn't any worry of it having to change temperature up to 0. It was already there. Okay, and where did the heat come from to convert the solid into liquid? Most of it came from what melted the ice? The water, okay, for the most part. We also said there could have been contributions from the surroundings and things like that. They would have been lesser to a lesser extent, but it was still would have been mostly the water. And then we calculated how much ice melted in our experiment. Okay, we're not going to have a conclusion, but we said our sources of error. Okay, the main ones would be in the amount of ice that melted. Okay, getting that accurate, okay, getting the ice out in time, and all of that kind of stuff is certainly an important part of the sources of error there. Okay, how can they be eliminated? With this experiment, not really, they can't be, okay, other than to not use our hands maybe to pull them out, but maybe to use a strainer instead, okay, but really there isn't another way, okay? Unless we were to use some sort of fancy bomb calorimeter or something like that. Okay, gonna move on here, guys, to biomes because I need more than one class to teach all of them to you. Okay, so my plan was to do this lab this morning, kind of get the math of it all done, and then move on to teaching you the biomes lesson. Especially since you have the Chromebook, you can actually open up the notes package on there, okay, and see the pictures a little bit better, a little bit bigger. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next here. Okay, so biomes is going to work like this. Okay, on your unit exam, in the multiple choice, there will be questions on biomes. That will be a picture and a description, and you'll have to identify the biome from the picture or description. The other way is in the written response, I give you a climatogram. You interpret the climatogram. Okay, you tell me, this place is, wet or warm, or it's near the equator, or these are the factors that affect this climate, whatever. Okay, and then you match it to one of the biomes that we're going to talk about today and tomorrow. All right, so that's how you have to know them. You have to be able to do that with the information that's in this lesson. Okay, all right. So the biomes of the world are as follows. Okay, these are the ones we're going to talk about anyway. We'll start out with tropical rainforest, which is the light green color, right? So you'll notice that tropical rainforest is found almost entirely near where? Near the equator, okay? In fact, you see very little tropical rainforest outside of the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, which is 23.5 degrees north or south, okay, of the equator, okay? You basically see none of it past 30 degrees north or south of the equator, all right? Just to give you some reference, the border between the US and Canada is 49 degrees north of the equator, okay? So we're a long way from anything tropical. All right, so tropical rainforest is mostly found there. A lot of it in South America. Obviously, this is the Amazon, okay, in here. And then there's quite a bit of it here in Southeast Asia. This would be like southern China, India, like Vietnam, Laos, Papua New Guinea, and all these kind of places in here. Okay, there's a lot of tropical rainforest in that area. Okay, and then there's a little bit of it in Africa here and there. Okay, but not a lot. Okay, most of it, like we say, is in these two areas here. Then we're going to have savanna. Okay, savanna would be what you would picture the African plains to look like. Okay, where you'd have elephants and things like that. Okay, that's the savanna, which is obviously most of it is in Africa. Okay, but there are bits of it in South America, separating kind of different parts of the Amazon here. It is a tropical grassland, so you don't find it outside of the tropical areas. Okay, but like we say, the bulk of it would be found in Africa. There's a little bit of it in Australia, okay, but that's where the bulk of it is. Okay, deserts. Now, there's different kinds of desert. Okay, there's hot deserts, and then there's just like mid-latitude deserts. So the main hot desert is obviously near the equator, and most of it here in northern Africa. So that would be like Egypt and places like that. Okay, like Tunisia, where they film like all the scenes for Tatooine and Star Wars. Okay, things like that. And then obviously most of the Middle East. Okay, so that would be like Iran, Iraq, Syria, Jordan. Okay, places like that. Those are all in the desert. Okay, and the outback, the central part of Australia is deserts. Okay. We see a bit of desert here through like northwestern Mexico and then into the southern United States. So this would be like Arizona, parts of Utah, Nevada, okay, places like that. And then we also see it here in Asia in a few places. Okay, we see it behind some of the big seas that we have, and we see it behind this. What's this white line here? That is the Himalayas. Okay? That white line is the Himalayas, and there's a desert behind it. Okay? Now, picture this. Now we're over here in a place that we're more familiar with. Okay? We've got a source of water. It can't get over the mountains. We've got a rain shadow behind it. In this case, it's not a desert, it's prairie. Okay? But over here, the mountains are 3 times higher. So this is a rain shadow desert. This is in fact the Gobi Desert, okay? And it is the rain shadow of the Himalayan mountains. Very little gets over the Himalayas, okay? As they're much, much taller than the Rockies are, right? So that's a rain shadow desert there. Okay, so different kinds of deserts, like hot desert, this would be a cold desert, or like not cold, but a mid-latitude desert. This would be a mid-latitude desert here, okay? And then obviously the stuff here in North America, also mid-latitude desert. And then there's what we call extreme desert, okay? An extreme desert is the kind of bluish white stuff that you see at the tops of mountains, okay? You see it here in Greenland. And if there's a continent missing, what continent is missing? Antarctica. Would it be covered in that color? Completely. Antarctica is extreme, is the definition of extreme desert. Nothing but rocks and ice. Okay, there's still like a kilometer thick ice sheet sitting on top of that continent. Okay, Antarctica is actually the driest continent. Okay, drier than Africa. It gets less precipitation than any other continent. Okay, it's so cold that any precipitation that falls there stays there. Okay, so it's been building up and building up and building up, but it is the driest continent in terms of rainfall. So those are going to be our extreme deserts, simply because there's no liquid water, or very little liquid water available in those places. Okay, so we're looking at glaciers and ice and things like that. Okay, then we have chaparral, which is also sometimes called the Mediterranean climate for obvious reasons, as most of it is around the Mediterranean. Okay, so if you've been to like Italy, okay, Greece and places like that, they are the chaparral climate. It's hot, it's fairly dry, but it's humid because it's close to the Mediterranean Sea. So you get lots of vineyards and olives and things like that. Okay, there's a little bit of stuff that's close to that in Southern California, kind of like Baja. Okay. The tip of Africa, the southern tip of Africa, and the southern tip of Australia also have similar biome to that. Okay. Then we have temperate grassland. Here we call that prairie. Okay, it's where we live. It's the biome that we're in. Okay, and so there's a lot of it. Okay, we often call this area here of North America the breadbasket. Okay, because a lot of agriculture goes on there. A lot of the world's food is grown in this area. Okay, and then there's obviously big tracts of it throughout Asia. Okay, it'd be like Mongolia and places like that. They would be prairie as well. Okay, there's also some in the in South America. There's some through Mexico as well, okay, and some in Australia too. Okay, but tends to be fairly dry, and we often see it bordering on desert. Okay, because it is a very dry biome. Okay, then we got temperate deciduous forest. A deciduous tree does what with its leaves every year? Sheds them, right? A deciduous tree loses its leaves every year. So we see that the bulk of the eastern United States, okay, and central Canada, right, would be this biome. So maple trees, oak, and things like that. Okay, much of Europe, okay, also, okay, that biome, although a lot of those trees were harvested during the Industrial Revolution, but this is to reflect what it should be. Okay, but it is definitely, okay, and we also see some of it here, okay, in parts of Asia. But it is definitely a mid-latitude biome. It's not something you would see in a tropical area. Okay, we only really see it in the northern hemisphere. Okay, and then we have taiga, which is coniferous forest. Coniferous trees make cones. So they are typically our pine and spruce trees. Okay, and that is probably the biggest part of Canada. Okay, is the taiga, and it's most of Russia. Okay, you can see here, it's the bulk of Russia, okay, and northern Asia there, right? So that's going to be, if you've been up to Fort McMurray, okay, or you go into Banff, that's taiga, okay? Just a carpet of spruce trees everywhere, okay? And unfortunately, wildfires are obviously a big deal in that biome, especially now, as that biome in most places in North America is reaching its maturity, which means the trees there are all very old. Okay? And when they get old, they get sick, and they just sit there, and they're fuel. Okay, the first thing that can happen, the first lightning strike, or person with a cigarette that's careless, or ATV that goes through with mud on the muffler, whatever, anything can kind of spark that fire. All right, and then lastly, we have tundra, okay, which is an Arctic or alpine grassland. Okay? Basically, it's too cold for trees to get a foothold, so it's an Arctic prairie or a high alpine prairie, okay, which is why we see bits of it along mountain ranges, okay, but we see the bulk of it here in northern Canada, okay, and up here in Siberia, right? That's where you get where the Soviets used to send people who screwed up. Okay? They'd send them to salt mine in Siberia. Okay? Yeah, and no one ever hear from you again. Okay? All right. So those are the biomes that we're going to be going over. We'll look at their climate. We'll look at their plant life, animal life, okay, soils, all of that kind of stuff. We'll be looking at it from a lot of different points of view. All right, so the tropical rainforest, okay? How many people have ever been to a tropical rainforest? Okay, so if you've been to Hawaii on the jungle side, not on the dry side, you've been to tropical rainforest. There's places in Mexico that would be, or sorry, not Mexico, like Jamaica, places like that, okay, where you'd see like some tropical rainforest. The Philippines, okay, places like that are all very tropical. Okay, what we see in a tropical rainforest is layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of vegetation. Okay, lots and lots of trees and undergrowth. Okay, there's just so much moisture and nutrients available in this area, and of course sunlight, that plants just go wild. Okay, so what we see here is only the top part of the tropical rainforest, which we call the canopy. Okay, it's the top kind of layer, okay, the tallest of all the trees. Okay, underneath that are understory layers. Okay, there's other layers of trees that don't grow as tall. Okay, they form other layers down below that, and then you get down into the ground layers, ground cover, things like that. There's just so much moisture that plants can really thrive. All right, so the general characteristics of the tropical rainforest are that they cover about 13% of the Earth's land surface, a number that is unfortunately dwindling. Okay, there's a lot of deforestation, okay, going on in the tropical rainforest, not so much for lumber, but a little bit, okay, but mostly for agricultural purposes. Okay, the people there are, clearing the rainforest and then trying to grow crops. The problem with that is there's very frequent flooding, and the soil is junk. Okay, in the tropical rainforest, the soil is terrible for the growth of crops. Okay, mostly because there isn't any topsoil. Believe it or not, you get all of this jungle and you have very little topsoil because it's always washing away. It's always being flooded. So all you have is this layer of clay that the plants grow directly out of. They get their nutrients from the floodwaters that actually sit there most of the time. Okay, so it's not a place where if you cleared out the trees and planted a crop that you're going to get a really good kind of product out of that. Okay, it could either get washed away in a flood, or you might get one crop and then you'll have expended all the nutrients in the soil and you'll have to move on. And that's unfortunately what's happening. People will get one crop, two maybe, and then the soil just fails. and so they go and clear another area to try and grow food. Okay? And they use what's called slash and burn agriculture. Okay? And it's exactly like it sounds. They cut down the trees and they set them on fire. Okay? And then they kind of till everything under and they try and grow crops there. Okay? The issue with that obviously is that you're continually burning and destroying more and more rainforest. And I don't want you to get the idea that these people are just like not smart or anything like that. They're just trying to eat. Okay? Most of these places are in kind of third world countries, just trying to make ends meet. Okay? And that's the way that they can do it. All right, so they're complex, they're variable, and they grow in areas with no distinct seasonality. In other words, look at the climatogram. Okay, look at our temperature line. Is there a bell curve? Like, is there a definite summer and winter in that line? No, it's the same temperature all year round. Okay, so no distinct seasonality. Okay, and we can also see that there's a lot of precipitation. All right, the driest month is 150 millimeters of rain. That's 15 centimeters. Right? To give you an idea, in 2013, when we had all that bad flooding, okay, in a 2-week period, we got 85 millimeters of rain. In the month of June, we got 120. Okay, so the worst flooding on record here would have been the driest month on record there. Okay, to give you some idea of just how much precipitation they get, which is also why you can see the jungle grows on incredibly steep mountainsides. Okay? Our mountainsides don't grow plants like that. It's too steep. The water just runs off and it's too dry, right? So they can't make it there. Here it rains so much that it doesn't matter. They can grow anywhere. It's like a chia pet. Okay? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? With chia pet? Okay, because I know that's kind of a generational thing. You don't see them much anymore. Okay? But they can grow everywhere. Even on this like tall spire here of rock, there's plants all over the whole thing. Okay? You'd be hard pressed to climb that. It's almost straight up and down. Okay? So high temperature, high rainfall, high humidity, okay, that's the tropical rainforest. Precipitation exceeds evaporation and transpiration. That means more rain falls than can evaporate. Okay? That's going to lead to flooding conditions and luxuriant vegetation. Okay? This is what the soil looks like in a tropical rainforest. Like I said, it's clay. Okay, it's often kind of reddish in color because the certain nutrients and minerals get kind of leached out of it. Okay, and by leaching, okay, I mean this: when water sits on top of soil, okay, it saturates the soil, and then nutrients dissolve from the soil into the water. Okay, and they move by diffusion from an area where they're highly concentrated, the soil, into the water where they're less concentrated. So literally the water sucks the nutrients out of the soil like a leech. Okay, it just sucks the nutrients out and then the water runs off and takes the nutrients with it. Okay, that's what makes these soils so poor for agriculture. Okay, what is really good is that decomposition is incredibly rapid. That means if something dies, it's going to be broken down, okay, and turned back into nutrients very, very quickly. Okay? In the tropical rainforest, if a tree falls down, it's going to be gone in a matter of weeks. Okay? There's going to be tons of fungus, tons of insects, tons of bacteria, and they can work steady. Okay? In Canada, a tree falls in the forest and it sits there for decades because there's 8 months of the year where it's frozen solid and nothing can work on it. Okay, and then there's the kind of hot, dry parts of the year where there's not a lot of moisture, and maybe some fungus might be working on it, maybe some ants made a nest in it, but they can only work on it a few months of the year. So it takes a lot longer, okay, for things to break down here than they would there. Okay. All right. Okay, so the soil profile, remember we talked about the A and B and C horizons earlier. Okay, the A horizon is essentially absent. There basically isn't one. Okay, the B horizon is the bulk of the soil and it's mostly clay, and then the parent material, okay, is further down from that. That's the rocks. Okay, so this is what the tropical rainforest looks like at ground level in a lot of places. Okay, what do you see? Yeah, plants, okay? Lots of them. It's really easy to get turned around in the tropical rainforest because the undergrowth is so thick. It's not like a forest here where, you can see between the trees for quite a ways. In the tropical rainforest, if you're not carrying a machete, okay, you're going to get lost, right? And I tell you that from experience, okay? I went for a hike one time in Hawaii through one of the rainforests, and that was a big mistake. okay? Because I got turned around and I was hopelessly lost for hours. It was only by sheer luck that I could hear a road at one point and was able to follow the sound and get back to a road, okay? Because I wasn't carrying a machete, the vegetation just closed in behind me and everything looked the same no matter which way I turned, okay? So I learned my lesson on that. Hiking in the rainforest is not like hiking in the forest here, okay, where you can see, right? You can't. So it's really, really, really thick. Okay, and then obviously I think I showed you this picture before. Okay, these are those kind of snorkel roots, okay, that tropical rainforest trees will grow in order to keep getting oxygen out of the air, even when their main roots are covered in water, because they can be submerged for months at a time. Okay, you see a similar thing if you've ever been to the Everglades in Florida. Okay, those trees just grow out of these swamps. It's kind of a similar thing. Okay. All right, so vegetation, they're very, very diverse. That's another thing that's different, okay? There's hundreds of different kinds of trees and plants in the tropical rainforest. All right, here in Canada, you go to Banff and you're gonna see white spruce, black spruce, Engelmann spruce, maybe some lodgepole pine, and like balsam poplar, and that's it. Okay, there's the extent of your diversity, 5 tree types. Okay, you go to the tropical rainforest and there could be up to 100 different tree types per hectare. Okay, to give you an idea, a hectare is roughly the area of a football field. Okay, 100 meters by 100 meters is a hectare. Okay, so roughly the area inside the running track. Okay, all right. Up to 8 different layers of vegetation from the ground to the tops of the trees. So we're talking about really, really dense, thick vegetation. Okay. All right, and the trees in the rainforest are evergreen, not evergreen like we have. They just don't lose their leaves. Okay, if you lose your leaves in the tropical rainforest, things will overgrow you. Okay, so you don't lose your leaves in the rainforest. Okay, now for animals, okay, we often have this idea because we're told this as kids that the lion is the king of the jungle. Lion doesn't live in the jungle. Okay, lives in the savanna, in the grasslands where he can see his prey from a long way away. Okay, so the bulk of the animals or the fauna in the tropical rainforest are insects. Lots and lots of bugs. Okay, if you don't like bugs, I do not suggest going to the tropical rainforest. You will not have fun because there are lots of bugs and lots of them are very big. Okay, you're going to see really giant cockroaches, like the size of your fist. Gross. Okay. Praying mantis. Okay. Walking sticks. Anyone ever seen a real walking stick? They are so cool. They look just like a stick. Okay. And if you actually let them like crawl on you and they're on hanging from your hand, if you blow on them, they will sway back and forth, mimicking what a real branch would do. They're like perfectly camouflaged in their environment. Okay. You could have like the dung beetle. Yeah, dung. That they make balls of dung. That's part of their mating ritual, actually. Okay, the males make these big balls of dung to impress the females, and one with the biggest pile of poop wins. Okay, weird but true. Okay, and then you have lots of like amphibians as well. Okay, because amphibians need to go back to water to lay their eggs. So you'll see lots of frogs and salamanders and newts and things like that. Many of them are often brightly colored and highly toxic. Right? For example, there are some tribes in the rainforest that will use the poison from the skin of certain frogs on their blow darts and arrows in order to hunt with. Okay? So they can be pretty dangerous, but it protects them because if something eats something like this, it'll get violently ill and it'll never eat something that looks like that again. Okay, so their bright colors often will discourage things from eating them. And you'll see lots of like rodents, okay, like this red panda, okay, small animals, but you're not going to see big animals. The biggest animal would be like the 3-toed sloth. Okay, where do all these animals live? You know, what part of it? On the ground or in the trees? In the trees, yeah. You can't live on the ground in the tropical rainforest. It's always flooding. Okay, you don't want to be a gopher. In the tropical rainforest, if you're a gopher, you better have like scuba gear because your hole is going to be full of water all the time. Okay, there are just no subterranean animals. All the animals basically are arboreal, which means they live in the trees. Okay, so they're going to be up in the trees, like the 3-toed sloth. Okay, I mean the 3-toed sloth is the slowest mammal. Okay? It moves incredibly slow, but it doesn't have to be fast because it lives in the trees and really doesn't have a lot of things that are going to prey on it, maybe other than a big snake. Okay? And there are going to be some of those in the tropical rainforest. They're going to be kind of the top predators in the tropical rainforest, be like, like an anaconda or a boa constrictor, vipers and things like that, okay, that would live in the tropical rainforest. They would be your apex predators, okay, unhinging their jaw and eating big giant meals, okay, like sloths. All right. Questions on the animals? All right, chemical cycling, like we said, it's really rapid. Okay, you can see here on the forest floor that there's a tree that has fallen, but it's already overgrown, and there's actually trees growing out of it. Okay, there's plants growing out of that tree already. Okay, they just decompose so quickly that they become nutrients for the next generation within weeks or months. Okay, so lots and lots of nutrients in there, but a lot of it can be lost in flooding. All right, you know what? We'll leave it there. I'll start Savannah tomorrow because I won't be able to get into it in the 2 minutes that we've got left. All right, so guys, keeping in mind, unit exam Thursday. Okay, be looking over everything. Okay, you're also not going to have any more quizzes. Okay, I'm not going to have a quiz tomorrow. You need to be studying. You need to be working on stuff. So no more quizzes. Okay, just work on your exam studying now.